Hi, and welcome to another exciting pirate news. Tonight, for your viewing pleasure, I have a nice burning fire, seeing that it's finally warm enough to actually be outdoors. And with me tonight, we have the one, the only, the mighty Steve, handling all of your property and zoning needs down in the town of Arlington.
Oh
And
no, it's just getting close to town meeting time, and being on a board that hears warrant articles for zoning changes, I'm kind of up to my eyeballs in that. But continue.
And then we have with us tonight, we only have one big story going on. And for that story, we have the mighty, the one, the only, the Maltz.
Hello, hello. We were scheduled to have an interview. Sadly, that has fallen through. So, mostly I'm just going to be reviewing the facts at hand about the situation here in Worcester with the nurses union.
And so, what can you tell us about that?
So, there's an organization called the National Right to Work Legal Foundation. And effectively, what they are a bunch of lawyers. And I mean that in the full 80s stand up sense of the word lawyer, you know, said with derision as though it were a profanity. And basically, what they do is they go in and they try and find workers who want to bring a grievance against their union. In 2018, they won a Supreme Court case against a union called AFSCME, which basically hamstrung the union's ability to collect dues. And the right to work, if you don't know, is a legal framework that allows someone who is in a workplace that is unionized to take all of the union benefits and not pay any of the dues or support the union in any way. So it's less right to work and more like right to steal. So how this applies to Worcester is St. Vincent. The nurses are represented by the Massachusetts Nurses Union, Massachusetts Nurses Association, a badass union. They won a union. It ran for 285 days. And the stipulation was that the nurses on strike had to be guaranteed to get their jobs back. It could have ended in August, but the CEO refused to promise the nurses their jobs back. So it continued into December for nearly a full year in the middle of a pandemic. So the issue was they hired back all of the nurses. I forget the exact number. 400 some nurses were brought back, and in addition, an extra 100 permanent replacement workers, aka scabs. So you've now got a split workplace where some nurses are represented and some nurses are not. In steps Cedric Richard Avola, who he does not seem to have been a healthcare worker prior to becoming a replacement nurse with St. Vincent. He partnered with the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation to lead a campaign to decertify the union immediately after they won. Let's see, there you got 254 nurses signed the initial petition to start the recall vote, which I found really interesting. I think what happened there is that a lot of them were told that they were going to be switching from the MNA to AFSCME because that is what C. Richard Avola has said would happen. So that's a lie. AFSCME, sorry.
I was going to say, Malt, isn't Ask Me for municipal work a union for municipal workers?
Yes, AFSCME stands for the American Federation of. Let me look that up.
Yeah, because I mean, as you're going on, I'm thinking, why would a municipal workers union be representing, nurses at a healthcare institution? And well, being at a loss, I couldn't, there wasn't anything an immediately apparent reason as to why. So that's why I asked.
Yeah, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. I think he picked AFSCME because that's the only other union he knows the name of. I'm just going to venture a guess. That's the one these lawyer scumbags won the case against. So that's the name that comes to mind for their incredibly obvious lie.
Okay.
That they said because they are lying liars.
I mean, you couldn't say anything credible like SEIU or, I don't know, the United Auto Workers or the Teamsters.
The Wobblies.
Yeah, the Wobblies. I miss the Wobblies, man. Okay, but please go on.
Yeah, sorry. So 254 nurses signed the initial petition. The final vote turned out to be 302 remain versus 133 leave. So that is a almost 3-to-1 ratio. First off, badass. Also, like half of the people who signed the initial petition then recanted. Like that's an interesting phenomena, I think.
It's still, I mean, in terms of votes, like 3-1 is a landslide.
Yeah. The MNA is extremely well liked by the members. They do a lot to support their members, including like a lot of direct support to the striking nurses directly, which the city Worcester was actively involved in the fight against. The there's a number of cameras were installed across the street facing the picket line on post office federal property, and the exact ownership of who installed the cameras is not entirely clear. Like the police have been rather hinky about explaining what was up with that shit.
Yeah, there's whenever there are demonstrations, it's always I have always found it fascinating to look at to see where the cameras appear, how quickly they appear, and then whether they stay up after the demonstration ends. I mean, are they still up now? Do you know?
I have not been in that part of town in quite some time, but I'm assuming they're still up.
Yeah, I mean, I had a case where a couple went up. They happened to be near where I lived, but you can start to, when the ownership is dubious, if you can get into things like, well, they attached it to a phone pole, although I guess it wasn't the case in this example. You just start writing to figure out who owns a phone pole and ask who applied to put a camera up there. Sometimes the people who own phone poles don't like people attaching crap to them. Running wires over roadways, that's another good one. That's another case where you can see, you could say, I'd like to see your permits. And sometimes the cameras come down after you ask those sort of questions.
Yeah, someone filed Freedom of Information Acts. I forget what organization they're with. I think it was the ACLU. Jamie, do you remember who it was?
Maya filed it.
One of ours?
Oh, she is a I don't remember the name of the news it was a local news organization, but she's someone who does journalism with a heavy emphasis on public records requests. She's actually we've worked with her to do seminars on how to make public records requests. She's badass.
Nice. Oh, speaking of local news organizations, I want to credit all of the information I've shared with you tonight has come almost directly from Bill Shaner's Substack, billshaner.substack.com, called Worcester Sucks and I Love It. Amazing writer, excellent local coverage, great, just a great writer. Also does great stuff with the community. He hosts a MST3K style shitpost live stream of the Worcester local city office meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Maya is the founder of crit.news. So thank you, Maya. Thank you, crit.news. Thank you, Bill Shaner. That's all from me. Did anyone have
Actually,
anything else?
could I ask a question about some of the stuff we discussed?
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of that union busting and union trying to break down that union, that doesn't seem 100% legal.
Oh, they break the law all the time. For union elections, I don't know about strikes. Union elections, employers violate law at least 45.1% of the time. Yeah, because they
I
have power.
remember when Walmart was like really being super anti-union. By the way, public, tonight with me, I have a possible delegate from New Hampshire that I've been trying to abscond from the right wing, but making him realize he's wrong in his ways and that he needs to become a pirate. His name is Jeff. Jeff, say hello for the folks.
Hello for the folks. My question is there a way to affect change from our position?
I mean, how violent are you willing to get?
How about we do FOIA requests to the point of absurdity?
Mm,
Well, there's, I mean,
Tab-
I was going to say one of the, just going back to kind of take a spin off something Malt said earlier about, Worcester sucks and I love it. And also, local journalism. I mean, once upon a time, it feels antique-y now, but, a lot of areas had functioning newspapers. I mean, places that did really honest reporting. And I think, one of the latest posts on Worcester Sucks and I Love It is, is Bill, talking about some of the, the professional difficulties he encountered when the organization, the magazine that he worked for, maybe the Worcester Gazette. But anyway, they were purchased by a large sort of conglomeration, Gatehouse Media, that owns local newspapers all over the freaking place. To the extent that folks are willing to like go to local meetings and blog, do some research and write about it. This can be genuinely useful. Transparency and all that.
Well, taking that to a whole new level, why don't we start doing this podcast like we do now, but maybe local radio stations and actually slicing out a piece of the airwave in order to just give the people the truth.
AM is pretty cheap, I think.
there's plenty of local radio stations in Worcester.
But that being said, we'll continue as pirates to fight for your rights.
There were two details I wanted to discuss. During the strike, St. Vincent spent a lot of money making T-shirts and buttons and stickers that tried to reclaim scab to mean support colleagues above bullying.
Whoa! I do not like this at all.
That is the most third grade elementary school teacher bullshit I've ever seen.
So big.
No.
Just want to go rewind a little bit and just ask a big picture question. So we know that this strike went on for a very long time, and there were attempts made to sort of break the union or, make it ineffective. What was the strike about in the first place?
Primarily about safe staffing ratios.
Yeah, the strike was about COVID and how many patients were coming in the door and how many patients each nurse was expected to take care of. And they didn't feel safe. They just didn't.
Couldn't handle.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing within my own home that if you're dealing with COVID patients, there's so many protocols in place that you need time for each patient, and you can't have 10 patients, you can't have 8 patients.
I think 10 patients is like the maximum that a lot of these nurses were saying, and they would get like 30
Yeah,
Yep.
or more.
dumping them on them.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
my mom was an ICU nurse, and you could definitely, even as a kid, you could definitely tell when mom had a big patient load, because even after work she'd be stressed. She'd need time to decompress from all of that. So having never worked in the nursing profession myself and not really knowing anything about it, I am inclined to believe that things like patient load matters, because I mean, it's partially it's important, I think, for the staff, but it's also important for the patients. A nurse can only do so many things at once, and it's not in the patient's best interest to be sitting around waiting for a long time when they need some sort of attention.
Yeah, it is impossible to overstate the psychic toll the pandemic has had on healthcare workers. Straight up.
All right, you ready? Yeah. Okay, guys, to play devil's advocate, if you're a hospital administrator and you've got the Walking Dead coming through the door, what do?
Hire more nurses.
Yeah, but where do you find those nurses? What, do
You
they
turn
grow on
on
trees or something?
you turn on the money spigot. You start paying for fast track nursing lessons. There are positions that you can hire fairly unqualified
But it
people
didn't
for,
happen.
in order to take a lot of the like the busy work load off of your more qualified nurses, so that they can start taking some of the load from the doctors. Giggity. Um, but yeah, no, you have to turn the money spigot on, and you have to onboard as many new workers as you can, and that means like you got to spend the money. And across every level on the pandemic, there has been a universal refusal on the part of the ownership class to do that.
Well, just a silly question, but since we're talking about money, if a patient comes in with COVID and needs to, say, stay a few days and go on a ventilator, or even just stay in the hospital for a few days, the hospital, I presume, is billing for that. And somebody's insurance company is probably paying for that. So, I'm sort of curious as to, you know, I don't know. This is another area where I don't know the answer to, but I'm sort of would be curious to know what kind of impact that COVID had on like a hospital's bottom line. Because it seems like it would drive the top line way up, but I could be completely wrong about that.
Actually, it would be, because they were just, especially in Massachusetts, going to Mass Health or Medicaid and getting paid.
Okay, so the hospitals had an equation that they were running day to day until this happened. X amount of people, X amount of cost, X amount of time, whatever. COVID screwed up that equation and created a negative void in their profits.
That's not at all true. The For 2021, Tenant recorded operating revenues of 19.5 billion, which was actually an increase from last year's 17.6 billion. And that was largely driven by the hospital segment. Like the profits, the annual profits have more than doubled, year over year.
All right. Well, I guess. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's so it plans to retire $700 million of debt, which I don't quite understand what that means, but like that's $700 million they didn't spend hiring new nurses in the middle of a global pandemic.
Well, that's all we have for you this evening, folks. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us, and appreciate it. My dogs are definitely going and saying "fight for the unions" right now.
You sure it's
And,
just not like a car or something?
It was definitely a car, but that's okay. But that being said, definitely like, share, and subscribe this video, especially if you support unions, and definitely sign up for our wiki, our blogs, and all of that. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this evening. Hope you enjoyed this fire that I had just for you, and see you next year.
Soothing.